Here is a question that sounds almost too obvious to ask until you actually sit with it. Why do humans go to war? Not why do we fight? Every animal fights. Lions fight. Wolves fight. Two stags will crack their skulls together over a single mate. Fighting is everywhere in nature, and it is nothing special. But only one animal builds armies. Only one animal draws a line across a map and decides that everything on the other side of it is the enemy. Only one animal trains soldiers, raises walls, stockpiles weapons, and sits down to plan, calmly and in advance, the destruction of an entire group of strangers it has never even met. A wolf pack defends its territory, but it never signs a treaty. A group of chimps will raid the neighbors, but they never build a fortress. No other creature on Earth has ever taken violence and turned it into a system with ranks and flags and borders and a chain of command. We did, and we have done it for so long that we barely see it anymore. We treat war as just another part of being human, like language or music. But there is nothing simple about it. Somewhere in our deep past, something flipped. A shove between two angry people slowly, over thousands of years, became a battle between two armies. And almost nobody stops to ask the obvious thing. How did that happen? And why us? Look at the world you actually live in. It is carved up by invisible lines. This land is mine. That country is theirs. This is my side, and that one is yours. You feel those lines all the time, even when you don't notice them. You feel it when you glance at a map and the borders are drawn in hard, confident color. You feel it in something as small and as silly as cheering for your team, and quietly, secretly, wanting the other team to lose. That little shiver of us versus them feels modern. It feels like something built out of flags and passports and politics, something we could put down if we just decided to. It isn't, and we can't. Not easily. That feeling is older than writing, older than cities, older than almost everything we proudly call civilization. And for the people who came before us, that line between us and them had nothing to do with pride, or sport, or politics. It was the line between living and dying. So to understand how we ended up here, we have to ask something darker than why do humans fight. We have to ask why we ever looked at other human beings and decided they were worth killing in groups. That is the real question hiding underneath this whole story. How did human violence climb all the way up from a single fist thrown in a moment of anger to organized slaughter, planned and carried out by hundreds of people moving as one? And when exactly did our ancestors first look across at another band of humans and decide they were better off dead? The answer is not that we woke up one morning crueler than every other animal. We didn't. The truth is stranger than that, and, in a way, much simpler. It all comes down to a single thing. At some point in our past, there was suddenly something worth stealing, and something worth dying to protect. Resources, territory, scarcity. Almost the entire blood-soaked history of human war grows out of that one root. Strip everything else away, and what is left is the oldest equation there is. Something valuable, someone who wants it, and no easy way to share. But to really see why that changed us forever, you first have to picture the world the way it was before there was anything worth fighting over at all. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in small bands. A few dozen people at most. They moved with the seasons, following the herds, following the rain, following the slow ripening of wild plants across the land. They owned almost nothing, for the simple reason that they owned only what they could carry on their own backs. Violence existed, of course. There were brawls around the fire. There was revenge that festered for years. There were fights over mates and over wounded pride. But all of it was personal, one man against another, one grudge at a time. And when two whole bands ran into each other and the air turned tense, the easiest choice was almost never to fight to the death. The easiest choice was simply to leave. The world was wide and mostly empty. The next valley over held the same animals, the same roots, the same clean water as this one. So why bleed for a patch of ground? Why lose a brother or a son when you could just walk a single day and find a patch exactly like it, with nobody on it? Think about what that means. Nobody builds a wall around something they are willing to abandon by morning. And so, for the overwhelming majority of human history, there were no walls. There was no conquest. There were no kingdoms. There was only movement and open land, and the quiet understanding that if a situation turned dangerous, you could always go. And yet, even back then, in those peaceful wandering bands, the seed of war was already planted deep inside us. We don't even have to imagine what it looked like. We can watch it, alive and breathing, in our closest living relatives right now. Chimpanzees go to war. It sounds like an exaggeration. It is not. In the forests of Africa, bands of male chimps will deliberately leave the safe center of their territory and move along its edges in a tight, silent line. They are not foraging. They are not hunting for food. They are patrolling a border. They are searching for a member of the neighboring group who has wandered too far alone. Someone isolated, someone outnumbered. And when they find that lone individual, they corner him and they kill him. The most famous example was recorded at Gombe in Tanzania across the 1970s. Over 4 long years, one community of chimpanzees, the Kasakela, methodically wiped out a neighboring community, the Kahama, killing the males off one by one in deliberate, targeted attacks until the other group simply ceased to exist. When researchers first wrote down what they had seen, many people refused to believe it. These weren't monsters in the dark. They were our cousins, behaving like an invading army. And that is the deeply uncomfortable truth, sitting at the very root of all of this. Coordinated, planned, group-against-group killing is not a human invention. We did not dream it up. It is far older than our species. We inherited the raw machinery for it from an ancestor we share with chimpanzees, millions of years before anything like a human walked the earth. But here is the catch. Here is the thing that makes us different. Chimps raid. They do not conquer. They never hold the captured ground. They never build a wall around it. They never grow a village into a kingdom. So somewhere along our path, a switch was thrown that was never thrown for them. Something turned a quick, deadly raid into something far larger and far more permanent. The question is what? To answer that, you have to understand the cold little rule that sits quietly underneath almost all group violence. The primatologist Richard Wrangham gave it a name. He called it an imbalance of power. Groups kill, he found, when they are sure they are going to win and almost certain to lose nothing themselves, when they massively outnumber the other side, when the target is alone and cut off, when they can strike hard and slip back into the trees before anyone is able to strike back. Lethal group violence usually does not explode out of hot, blind rage. It is calculated. It is patient. It is cold. It happens precisely when the math quietly says that it is safe to do. And that math needs 2 separate things to both be true at once. First, there has to be something genuinely worth taking. And second, just as crucial, the other side has to be unable to simply turn and run away. For as long as humans kept moving, that second condition was almost never met. You could ambush a rival band and win, and then what? They scattered over the hills, and you were left on a stretch of land identical to the one beside it. War, for a nomad, simply was not worth the blood. For that to change, for the math to finally tip, the world needed something genuinely new. It needed something worth standing your ground for, even at the risk of dying. Something you could not just pick up and carry away into the next valley. And here is the twist that quietly rewrites the entire story. War did not patiently wait for farms and kings to show up first. It broke out the very moment a single place on Earth became worth staying for. Travel to a place called Nataruk, on the shore of Lake Turkana in Kenya. Around 10,000 years ago, 27 people died there, all at once. Their bodies were never buried. They were left exactly where they fell, and over the centuries the marsh rose up and quietly swallowed them whole. The bones that came back out tell a brutal, unmistakable story. Skulls caved in buclops, sharp stone arrow tips driven deep into necks and into chests. Several of the victims, including a woman in the final stages of pregnancy, had their hands bound behind them. Among the dead were women and small children. This was not a fight. This was a massacre. And the weapons left behind told the investigators something crucial. Some of the arrow points were carved from obsidian, a black volcanic glass that simply does not occur naturally in that area. The attackers were not neighbors settling a quarrel. They came from somewhere else. They traveled to do this. They came on purpose. So why here? Why this group, in this spot? Because this was no ordinary patch of dirt. It sat beside a rich lagoon, thick with fish. And these people had pottery, which means one quietly revolutionary thing. They were storing food. For perhaps the first time anywhere in human history, a band of people had something genuinely worth stealing, and a place genuinely worth holding on to. That is the moment. That right there is when a raid becomes a war. Not when the first crops are planted, not when the first king is crowned. The instant a group of humans possesses something they cannot carry and cannot bear to walk away from, the old cold math finally tips over. Now you don't run anymore. Now you stay. Now you plant your feet on your ground, and you kill, and you die, to keep it. And once humans finally found something worth dying for, They did what no chimpanzee ever has. They stopped moving, they settled down, and settling down changed everything that came after. When people began to settle and to farm, they created something the world had never seen before, at least not at this scale. Wealth that could not get up and walk away, fields heavy with grain, granaries packed full against the winter, wells dug deep into the earth, herds of animals penned and fattening, and suddenly there was so much worth taking. But here is the trap, the cruel hidden cost of all that abundance. There was now so much that forced you to stand and defend it. You cannot flee from a wheat field. You cannot sling a full year of stored grain over your shoulder and run for the hills. The very thing that finally fed your children also chained you to one fixed spot on the map and turned that spot into a target. And the deeper archaeologists dig, the clearer the pattern becomes. At Jebel Sahaba, in what is now Sudan, lies one of the oldest cemeteries scarred by violence anywhere on the planet, around 13,000 years old. Roughly 2 out of every 3 bodies buried there show injuries. Half of those wounds were punched in by projectiles, by spears, and by arrows. And the most recent analysis suggests these people were not killed in a single great famous battle. They were killed in wave after wave of raids, stretching across generations, as the climate shifted and the resources they all depended on slowly began to dry up and vanish. Sit with that for a second. The first clear evidence of human warfare in the ground is also, at the very same time, evidence of scarcity. Where the food ran short, the killing began. The two are not a coincidence. They are the same story. And around these new permanent settlements, a brand new kind of object starts showing up in the soil. Something no wandering nomad ever had the slightest need to build. Walls. A wall is never just a wall. A wall is a confession written in stone and mud. It quietly admits that someone out there wants what you have and wants it badly enough to come in the night and take it by force. And to raise a wall, to guard it around the clock, to feed the men who stand watch on top of it instead of working the fields below, you suddenly need something brand new as well. And this is where the whole story turns one final time, in a direction that almost everyone has completely backwards. We tend to assume it all ran in one neat order. First came kings and governments and organized states, and then those states went off and waged their wars. But the arrow of cause and effect runs just as powerfully in the opposite direction, and that is the part we forget. Think it through. To raid on a large scale, and to defend yourself against being raided, you need men whose entire job is to fight. Warriors who do not farm. And the moment some men only fight and never grow food, somebody else has to feed them, which means somebody has to control the granary. And if a whole group of armed men is going to strike as a single body instead of a mob, somebody has to be giving the orders. A leader, a chief. And the moment there is captured loot to divide, you need agreed rules for who gets, what share, or the victors simply turn their weapons on each other. And that, right there, is the faint beginning of law. So look at what war quietly dragged into existence behind it. Professional soldiers, control of the food supply, chiefs and commanders. The first rough rules of law. War is not the obedient child of the state. War is one of the midwives that helped pull the state screaming into the world. And every single new layer of organization unlocked a bigger war than the one that came before it. A band swallowed another band and hardened into a village. Villages were welded together under one strong man into a chiefdom. Chiefdoms fused into kingdoms, and kingdoms, hungry and armed and organized, swelled outward into empires that swallowed whole regions at a time. The single furious punch between two people, scaled up across 10,000 relentless years, became 2 vast armies stretching all the way to the horizon, fighting and dying over fields and gold and stored grain that neither side could ever hope to carry away. The fist became the warband. The warband became the army. The argument over a single fishing lagoon became the conquest of entire continents. And it was the exact same cold math driving it the whole way up that long bloody ladder. Just with more and more and more worth taking at every rung. Which leaves us with one last, genuinely uncomfortable question. If war helped build so much of the world we live in, our leaders, our laws, our nations, then are we simply stuck with it forever? Let's face the hard part first, honestly. We are walking around today carrying a mind that was shaped by scarcity, a mind built for small bands and constant nearby threat. And we carry that ancient mind inside a world where a handful of people can now end millions of lives in a single afternoon. The instinct was forged for throwing spears across a clearing. It now sits behind weapons that could erase whole cities from the map. That gap between the old mind and the new power should frighten us. It honestly should, but there is another side to this. And it is the more hopeful one, the one worth holding on to. The very same set of abilities that once let us kill in coordinated groups, the careful planning, the deep cooperation, the fierce loyalty to us standing against them, are the exact same abilities that let us build everything else. To raise a city, you need thousands of total strangers to trust one another and pull in the same direction. To write a single law that millions of people will choose to obey. To cooperate on a scale that no other animal on Earth comes close to matching. The machinery of war and the machinery of civilization turn out to be, disturbingly, the very same machine. We just pointed at different things. And there is one more thing, though honest researchers still argue fiercely over the exact details. Many of them have come to believe that the chance of any single human being dying at the hands of another has actually fallen, and fallen dramatically, compared to that deep and violent past. We have not deleted the instinct. You cannot delete 1,000,000 years of inheritance with a few centuries of good intentions. But slowly, stubbornly, generation by generation, we have been learning to tame most of it. We pour it into stadiums now, instead of onto battlefields, into elections, instead of midnight raids, into furious arguments online, instead of arrows loosed from the dark. So the next time you glance down at a map and see those hard, confident borders, or feel that ancient little shiver of my side against your side, stop for just 1 second and remember what you are really feeling. You are touching the oldest scar our species carries. You are feeling the echo of the exact moment our ancestors first owned something they could not bear to walk away from, and made the fateful choice to stay and stand and fight for it. The same deep instinct that once drove us to conquer one another is the very instinct that is now, quietly, holding us together. We were the only animal that ever managed to turn a single fist into an empire. And we may yet turn out to be the only animal clever enough and brave enough to finally put that fist back down.